He treated you like an option, like your love was something he could pick up and put down whenever it suited him. And while you waited, hoping he'd finally choose you, he gave you just enough to keep you hanging on, but never enough to feel secure. Sound familiar? Now imagine this. Instead of chasing him, you go silent. You stop reacting, you stop proving, you stop showing up for someone who never truly showed up for you. And in that silence, something powerful happens, not just to him, but to you. You begin to rise. You shift from being available to being unreachable, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. He starts to feel your absence like a weight. He wonders where you went, why the power dynamic changed. But this time it's not about making him miss you. It's about becoming someone he can't reach the same way twice. Because you've outgrown that version of yourself, the one that settled, waited, hoped. This isn't about revenge. It's about evolution. Becoming the woman who doesn't just get chosen, she gets remembered, missed, regretted. And by the time he realizes what he lost, you've already become irreplaceable. When someone treats you like an option, it's easy to fall into the trap of trying harder. We think, if I just show more love, be more available, give more of myself, maybe they'll finally see my value. But the truth is that strategy doesn't work, not in love, not in life. Because what you're doing isn't inspiring them to step up, it's training them that they can give you less and still keep you around. And when you reward someone's neglect with your effort, all you're doing is confirming that they don't need to try harder to keep you. They've already won without playing the game properly. I know it's painful. I know it feels like if you pull away, you'll lose them entirely. But let me ask you something. What exactly are you afraid of losing? Because if someone only wants you when it's easy, when they don't have to invest emotionally, when they don't have to show up consistently, what do you actually have? A placeholder, a distraction, a comfort zone for them, but a prison for you. You weren't born to compete for a place in someone's life. You weren't meant to convince someone to choose you. Love isn't supposed to be a sales pitch. The more you try to prove you're worthy of their attention, the more you'll shrink yourself to fit into their half-intested version of a relationship. And the more you shrink, the more invisible you become to them. That's the irony. When you go above and beyond to be seen by someone who doesn't value you, you actually make it easier for them to ignore you. They take your effort for granted. They assume you'll always be there because you've shown them that no matter how little they give, they still get all of you. That's where the shift needs to happen. Not in how much you care, but in how much you chase. Stop chasing. Start elevating. You don't need to run after anyone to prove your value. You need to rise so far above their level of effort that it becomes obvious you no longer belong in that dynamic. Elevating means realizing you have nothing to prove to someone who couldn't even match your energy. It means choosing your peace over their mixed signals. It means walking away, not because you don't care, but because you finally do, about yourself. You elevate by setting new standards, not for them, but for you. What kind of communication do you deserve? What kind of consistency are you no longer willing to live without? What kind of energy feeds your soul instead of draining it? That's the level you need to hold yourself to. Because the second you stop accepting crumbs, you create space for a full meal. You stop being an option the moment you realize you are not optional. This isn't about being cold. It's not about playing games or punishing anyone. It's about stepping into the life you were meant to live. A life where you're not begging for love, but attracting it effortlessly through your energy, your boundaries, your presence. And when someone comes along who can't rise to that level, you don't bend. You bless them from a distance and keep moving. Not because you're heartless, but because your heart finally knows its worth. And here's what's wild. When you stop trying to prove yourself, the whole dynamic flips. Suddenly the person who treated you like an option starts feeling the void you leave behind. They realize they no longer have access to that incredible energy, that softness, that effort you gave so freely, they start to regret, they start to notice. But by then, you've already elevated so far beyond them that their attention feels irrelevant. And that's the moment you win. Not because you hurt them, but because you finally chose you. You don't make someone regret treating you like an option by showing them they were wrong. You do it by living in a way that shows them they never even knew what they had. And when they look back and realize they lost someone who never needed to chase, only to be seen, they feel the weight of that loss more than any speech, argument, or silent treatment ever could. You don't need to chase love. You need to rise so far above low effort that it can't even reach you anymore. You know what happens when someone treats us like an option? We start reacting to their breadcrumbs, reacting to the mixed signals, reacting to the days they vanish and suddenly reappear like nothing happened. We find ourselves in this emotional roller coaster where we're not actually choosing anything. We're just constantly responding to whatever crumbs they decide to throw our way. And in that place, we lose our power. Because power doesn't live in reaction. Power lives in intention. Think about this. Every time you jump to reply to that late night text, every time you make yourself available after days of silence, every time you bend your plans because he suddenly decided to notice you again, you're reacting. And he feels that. He feels your emotional availability, no matter how little effort he gives. And when someone can feel that you're always going to be there, regardless of how they show up, they stop valuing your presence. They don't mean to do it maliciously, but they know, consciously or not, that they don't have to give more. And they won't because they don't have to. So the shift has to be internal first. Instead of reacting, start deciding. Decide who gets your energy, your time, your space. Decide not to reply instantly, not because you're playing games, but because you're not making them the center of your world. You're living yours. Decide not to explain your silence. Decide not to send that long paragraph trying to decode the distance. Decide that you don't chase people who make you feel confused. That's not pride. That's self-command. When you're intentional, you're not caught in the loop of proving your worth. You're not trying to pull someone back in with effort they never matched to begin with. You're not hanging on to moments, trying to stretch them into meaning. You're choosing to live in clarity, not confusion. And clarity says, if someone wants to be in your life, they'll be there. If they're inconsistent, you don't need to guess. That is the message. Intentional living isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about knowing that your care has value. And when someone treats it like an option, like a convenience, like something they can come back to whenever they're bored or lonely, you take that care and redirect it inward. Not as a punishment, but as a realignment. Because here's the thing. The more you live with intention, the more magnetic you become. Why? Because people can sense when you're not waiting for them, when you're not addicted to their attention, when you're not hinging your day, your mood, your confidence on whether or not they decide to make an effort. That kind of emotional independence is rare. And trust me, it's deeply attractive. When you move out of reaction, your whole energy changes. You stop being the person on standby, waiting for a text, analyzing every word, trying to decipher emotional hieroglyphics. You become the person who knows how to walk away from confusion. You don't throw tantrums. You don't beg. You don't announce your exit. You just move quietly, powerfully. And in that silence, they feel something they haven't felt before. The consequence of losing you. Now, it's easy to tell yourself, but I don't want to play games. Good. Because this isn't a game. This is a standard. This is about refusing to be emotionally available to someone who is emotionally inconsistent. It's about recognizing that you are not a placeholder for someone else's convenience. And it's about reclaiming your emotional dignity. You don't do this hoping he'll come back. You do it so you come back to your strength, to your self-respect, to your peace. You do it so that you are not longer at the mercy of someone's half-hearted effort. You don't react to breadcrumbs, you raise your appetite. You don't lower your standards to keep someone, you maintain them to find the right someone. And here's the beautiful irony. When you stop reacting and start living intentionally, that's when they feel your absence the most. That's when the dynamic shifts. Because the silence that used to make you anxious, now it makes him question everything. He starts to realize he no longer has the same hold, that the emotional access he once took for granted has been revoked, and not with drama, not with a speech, but with grace and finality. So next time you're tempted to respond right away, to fight for clarity, to chase after mixed signals, pause. Ask yourself, am I reacting out of fear or am I choosing from power? That one moment of awareness can save you days, weeks, even years of unnecessary heartbreak. He doesn't get to decide your worth with his inconsistency. You decide your worth by what you tolerate. Choose to stop reacting. Choose to start rising. You know, one of the most overlooked forms of self-respect is removal. Not dramatic exits, not angry outbursts, not endless explanations, just quiet, graceful removal of your energy. When someone treats you like an option, what they're really doing is assuming you'll always be there. They've come to rely on your presence without appreciating it. And that's the thing about presence. It's invisible to those who assume it's permanent, but the moment you step away, something shifts, not just in the dynamic, but in their internal world. Suddenly the person who was once a given becomes a question mark. The person who was always there is now gone. That silence, that distance, it starts ringing in their ears. You don't have to send a long message. You don't have to post something cryptic. You don't have to try to get noticed, because the most powerful realization anyone can have is what they've lost when it's no longer accessible. Your emotional availability, your check-ins, your support, those things were never small. They were constant signals that someone was in their corner. And he didn't clock that value when it was right in front of him because it was easy, predictable, safe. But here's the twist. We don't realize what we had until we experience the vacuum of it, until the comfort is replaced with silence, until the constant energy is replaced with space. And that space, it speaks volumes. You don't need to spell it out for him. Your absence is the message. It's the echo of everything he overlooked. And it forces him to confront the truth without your help. Here's what happens when you remove yourself with calm, with certainty, without drama. He begins to feel the cost of what he once dismissed. That's the beginning of regret. Not when you plead, not when you cry, but when you go quiet and live. When you go silent. Not because you're playing a game, but because you've remembered who you are. You've remembered that, your time, your love, your attention, it all carries weight. And if he didn't respect it when it was his, he doesn't get to access it when he's curious. Let me say this clearly. Your silence is not passive. It's not a void. It's a statement. One that says, I no longer invest in places where I'm not valued. One that says, I've withdrawn my energy from what no longer serves me. That kind of silence isn't weakness. It's not resignation. It's the highest form of strength. It's you refusing to be baited, refusing to settle, refusing to sit and wait for a maybe. And trust me, that absence, it stings. It challenges the very ego that took you for granted. It presses on the part of him that thought you'd always be an option. And now, in the stillness, he's left to wonder. Who has her attention now? Why isn't she responding? Is she done for good? That's the storm that brews when someone finally realizes they weren't dealing with someone desperate. They were dealing with someone devoted. And now that devotion has found a new direction, inward. But this isn't about revenge. It's not about playing cold. It's about realignment. You're not trying to hurt him. You're just done hurting yourself. And in doing so, you take the focus off of making him see your worth and start embodying that worth on your own. That's what makes him look back. Not because you chased, not because you begged, but because you finally left him in the emptiness he created. It's in your absence that he finally meets the consequences of his action. No lecture needed, no guilt trip. You've stepped back, and in doing so, you've created a mirror. One he has to face alone. That's the moment he regrets. Not the day you texted twice, not the week you cried and fought, but the month you said nothing, the season you disappeared, the version of you he knew, warm, available, understanding, is now nowhere to be found, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. And here's the beauty of it all. While he's sitting in that silence, wondering what went wrong, you're outgrowing the need for him to even figure it out. Because by the time he does, you'll be too far ahead to circle back. Let him feel what it's like to lose you, quietly. If he comes back, it shouldn't be to the same version of you. That version of you, the one who waited for a text, who overanalyzed every message, who accepted inconsistency and called it love, that version is gone. Or at least, she's in the process of evolving. Because when someone treats you like an option, and you finally decide you're done being on standby for their moments of convenience, there's a quiet transformation that begins. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's real. And it starts with the decision to no longer be accessible in the same way. You see, people repeat behaviors that work for them. If he could dip in and out of your life, send the occasional miss you text, act hot and cold, and still keep you emotionally tethered, that's exactly what he'll keep doing. Why? Because it works. Because every time he felt unsure about you or bored or lonely, you were still there. And not just physically, you were emotionally available, still hopeful, still waiting, still handing out chances like candy to someone who never earned them. But the moment you decide no more, everything shifts. The rules of engagement change, not out of spite, not out of manipulation, but out of self-preservation, out of finally choosing your peace over the chaos he brought. Now here's the hard part, the part most people struggle with. When he reaches back out, and he will, maybe not right away, maybe not in the way you expected, but when he does, you have to remember, he's reaching out to the version of you that used to let him back in. He's betting that you're still in the same emotional place. He's counting on you still having the same buttons to push, the same feelings to reactivate, the same door unlocked. But what if that door is different now? What if he comes back and finds a woman who no longer needs his attention to feel validated, who no longer confuses his occasional interest for genuine commitment? What if he sees that he no longer holds the power to shake your world because your world has become more full, more grounded, more centered without him? That's the kind of regret that hits hard. Because here's the truth. Men don't usually regret losing the woman who begged them to stay. They regret losing the woman who leveled up the moment they walked away. The woman who stopped waiting and started living. The woman who built something in their absence that now makes them look back and realize they don't belong there anymore. You need to become the woman he can't reach the same way twice. Not because you're playing a game, but because you've changed the game altogether. You're not sitting by the phone anymore. You're not making excuses for his lack of clarity. You're not trying to decipher his mixed signals. You've outgrown all of that. And now your life has new standards. Ones that require consistency, clarity, and care, not just chemistry. It's not about pretending you don't feel anything. Of course you did. You cared. You wanted it to work. You invested real time, real emotion, real hope. But now you're investing all of that in yourself, in your growth, in your friendships, in your dreams, in people who show up, not just when they're lonely, but because they value you consistently. And if he ever tries to return, he should feel that difference immediately. He should sense that something's changed, that access isn't so easy anymore, that the conversations don't feel the same, that you're not reacting the same way, that you're not hungry for breadcrumbs because you're sitting at your own damn table now. Because once you've done the inner work, once you've healed from the illusion of potential and learned to love with your eyes open, you start to see clearly. If someone could treat you like an option once, they'll do it again, unless you raise the price of admission. That means you don't go backwards. You don't water yourself down just to make it easier for someone to swallow you. You stay rooted in the new stand. And if he wants back in, he's got to approach from a place of growth too, with real effort, with a changed mindset, with actions that align with his words. Otherwise, it's not a reunion, it's a repeat. So let him come back if he does. Let him see what it looks like when a woman finds her worth outside of his approval. Let him feel the shift. Let him realize that the version of you he took for granted isn't just unavailable. She's unrecognizable now. And not because you became someone else, but because you finally became yourself. That's the moment. He'll regret everything he never appreciated when he had the chance. Silence gets misunderstood. A lot of people think silence means you're giving up, that you're weak, that you don't know what to say, or that you're avoiding confrontation. But silence, real silence, the kind that's intentional, isn't weakness. It's one of the strongest moves you can make when someone has treated you like you're just an option. Because here's what happens when you've been treated like that. You start over-explaining yourself. You try harder. You double text. You make excuses for his behavior. You tell yourself, maybe he's just busy, or maybe he doesn't know how to express himself. And in that process, you become louder, not necessarily with your voice, but with your energy. You show up more. You lean in. You accommodate. You shrink your needs and magnify his potential. But what if instead of doing more, you did less? Not as a trick, not as some reverse psychology manipulation, but as a declaration of self-respect. Silence doesn't mean you disappear into the background hoping he notices you're gone. It means you finally realize that talking, explaining, and defending yourself to someone who isn't even trying to understand is draining your life force. And instead of bleeding energy into that void, you choose to protect it. When you stop replying instantly, when you don't initiate that next conversation, when you don't remind him what he's missing, you actually create the most powerful shift possible. You turn the spotlight away from him and shine it on yourself. And guess what happens? He feels it. Not always right away, but he does. There's something about silence that echoes in a man's mind louder than any words, because he was used to your emotional availability, your predictable kindness, your reliability, the knowing that if he reached out, you'd be there. And now, you're not. And that's what forces him to sit with his own thoughts, to feel the gap that your presence used to fill, to notice how easy it was to take you for granted when you kept showing up, even after he made you feel like you are optional. That's the part people underestimate. Silence isn't passive. It's not just the absence of sound. It's the presence of self-control. It's what happens when you decide, I don't need to prove anything anymore. I'm not fighting for a seat at a table that doesn't value me. And let me be clear, this isn't about being cold or punishing. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about choosing peace over chaos, dignity over desperation, and self-worth over temporary attention. Because here's the truth. When you've been treated like an option, your silence is a boundary. It says, if you can't treat me with clarity, consistency, and care, then you don't get access to me at all. It's a boundary wrapped in grace. Not revenge, not pettiness, but grace. You're not slamming doors, you're just closing them quietly. And that quietness is exactly what makes people listen. He may start to wonder, where did she go? Why isn't she reaching out anymore? Did I push her too far? Is someone else talking to her? His mind will spiral, not because you manipulated the situation, but because he finally has to deal with the consequences of not valuing you when he had you. And here's the best part. While he's over there feeling the void, you're over here filling your life with things that feed you. You're pouring into your friendships. You're focused on your passions. You're creating space for someone new to walk in and treat you with the certainty and respect you've always deserved. You're not waiting for him to notice. You're not hovering in the background hoping he chases you. You're simply living louder than ever in the silence of no longer entertaining someone who couldn't see your worth when it was right in front of him. So no, silence isn't weakness. It's the moment you stop making noise for someone who was never listening. And that's the moment they start to hear you loud and clear. You know, we all fantasize about that moment when the person who took us for granted comes crawling back. That movie scene apology, the "I didn't know what I had until it was gone" speech, the late night text that says, "I messed up." And sure, in the short term, it feels good to be wanted again, to feel like we finally won. But if we're being honest with ourselves, that feeling is fleeting. Because deep down, it's not about them coming back. It's about proving that we were worth staying for in the first place. But here's the thing, that's not power. That's still responding to someone else's validation. That's still defining our value based on whether or not someone else finally recognized it. And that's dangerous. Because when your self-worth is built around being reclaimed, your peace will always be at the mercy of another person's regret. That's why I want you to shift the goal entirely. Instead of hoping to be reclaimed, choose to become irreplaceable. That means building a life so full, so magnetic, so aligned with who you truly are, that whether or not they regret it becomes irrelevant. Because you're no longer looking backward, waiting for someone to validate you with their remorse. You're too busy creating something that they were never capable of contributing to you in the first place. Think about it. If they couldn't see your value when it was right in front of them, if they needed to lose you to realize it, what does that say? It says they didn't have the capacity to meet you where you were. And we don't shrink ourselves to be reclaimable by someone who lacked the emotional maturity to value us the first time. We rise, we evolve, we become a person so connected to our standards that their return isn't tempting, it's irrelevant. Now, becoming irreplaceable isn't about being perfect. It's not about looking better, having more followers, or suddenly becoming ungettable in some superficial way. It's about knowing yourself deeply. It's about recognizing that your worth was never diminished just because someone else failed to recognize it. It's about stepping into your power, not by proving anything to them, but by proving something to yourself. What do you do when someone treats you like an option? You stop making them your priority. You stop waiting for the apology. You stop hoping that they'll finally wake up, because your life becomes too beautiful to wait around in emotional limbo. You build friendships that energize you. You do work that fulfills you. You engage in experiences that feed your soul. And when he looks back, because at some point he will, he won't recognize the version of you that now exists, and he shouldn't, because that version of you was built through pain, through growth, through the quiet strength of choosing yourself when it would have been easier to settle for less. And the best part, you won't even feel like getting even. You'll just feel free. Free from the need to be seen, free from the craving to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself in ways they never could. You've already become something they could never replace. Not because you played games, not because you made them jealous, but because you did the real work, the internal work. And that's the kind of glow they can feel even from a distance. That's the kind of transformation that doesn't beg to be noticed, but always is. So no, don't wait for them to come back. Don't live for that moment where they finally say you were right. Don't build your confidence around their regret. That's not your win. Your win is the peace that comes from knowing you outgrew the person they met. Your win is looking in the mirror and recognizing the strength it took to let go. Your win is realizing you don't need closure from someone who never gave you clarity to begin with. You are not here to be reclaimed. You are here to become irreplaceable.